So welcome to all of you, and a really big heartfelt thank you for supporting these projects with Karuna Sechen and supporting this project that I'm doing right now, which is this Ayurvedic webinar. And we're going to be looking at different ways that you can boost your immunity using really common sense approaches. And it's all in support of Karuna Sechen. And they have wonderful projects throughout the Himalayan region, throughout India, Nepal, and Bhutan, as well as Tibet occasionally, whenever it's possible. And here are some images from the past projects that they've done. This is up in the upper right-hand corner. You see Mathieu Ricard, and he is a French. Originally a scientist who about 40 years ago became a monk and has been living in the Himalayas in Nepal, in the Sechen monastery in Nepal, which is quite remote. He's very fluent in many, many languages, including Tibetan and Hindi, English, and obviously French. And he is the official French translator for the Dalai Lama. And 20 odd years ago, I think it's 21 exactly years ago, he developed Karuna Sechen to support the communities that he lives nearby in the regions where the monasteries are, because he saw that there was no access to healthcare or education, and he wanted to do something about that. He knew he had connections in the West, and he knew there was a way of raising funds and getting those projects underway to help. Today, we're going to be looking at strong immunity with Ayurveda. So as a way of keeping yourself well, and it doesn't matter if you've already been vaccinated or if you're not planning on being vaccinated, or if you've been ill or you're feeling fine. We want to work on our immunity because we live in this world now where COVID is going to be with us for quite a while. It's probably another couple of years or perhaps a few years where COVID is going to be lingering, at least as a primary concern, and then gradually tapering off as immunity builds and as people find ways around the pandemic. Pandemics are not new, and Ayurveda has advice on what to do in pandemics, and those are what you're going to hear this evening. Ayurveda itself as a word means knowledge of life. So Ayur is life and Veda is wisdom or knowledge. It's sometimes translated as science, but it's not so much a science as a know-how. It's a profound knowing. So what Ayurveda is that it is about adopting lifestyle and eating habits and changing your diet to suit your personal needs and the time of day, as well as the seasons. So adjusting your life to what is going on around you. And it's also about maintaining your daily habits and rituals that support your good health, that you do things consistently in such a way that your body gets a sense of regularity. And it's also about eating mindfully, seasonally, and sustainably. So those are really major foundations of Ayurveda. Because it's become very popular, there's some really superficial notions of what it is, but you can't really say that you're living an Ayurvedic lifestyle if you're just taking some supplements, but then not really following the main guidelines. What Ayurveda is not, to clear up some of the preconceptions about Ayurveda, it's not about eating Indian food. It's not about knowing your dosha or your body type and following this corresponding diet. That's one fragment of it, but that's certainly not the whole thing. And it's not about taking herbs or infusions. So those are potentially aspects of Ayurveda. But as I said, it's not sufficient. It's not enough to do any of these things without the underpinnings of a bigger picture that changes your lifestyle. Why is Ayurveda relevant today? It's because it offers a really easy, very inexpensive, and totally natural or non-invasive common sense principles for improving and maintaining health for life. And it also teaches us to become self-reliant and empowered. And it develops our natural instincts to understand our own body, which is connected. Ayurveda is very clear that the body and mind are one, and that they're connected, and that they have needs, and we can become very attuned to our needs. And especially as we're in a very unstable period of time, and there's an enormous amount of worry and fear around health at the moment, it's really helpful to become more intuitive and more in tune to your own body. COVID-19 has a complex mechanism, and experts are still trying to figure it out. It's not like previous pandemics or previous flus or previous various illnesses that have passed around in other times. And because of that complexity, doctors are finding that they have to find new and novel kind of individualized approaches to healing each patient. This kind of one size fits all model that always gets applied on the mass level is not really working well with COVID, and they're having to adjust treatment as they go. And so one of the truly positive things that's coming out of this pandemic is that more and more doctors are seeing that they have to treat a kind of a holistic or a systemic person rather than just the symptoms that they're presenting. So they really are seeing that treating this or that part of COVID is not having any effect, and they need to treat the individual in sometimes quite novel ways. So Ayurveda always believed that this was the way to be healthy. Ayurveda emphasizes holistic and individualized health treatments. And the texts of Ayurveda are between 2,500 and 3,500 years old. Some of them are more recent, only maybe 800 to 1,000 years old. But the original texts have been around for thousands of years. And this practice is founded in this very common sense approach to the entire person. So understanding that the impact of mental health on the physical body and also physical health on the mind is inherent to human nature. So we can't separate out the two, and both require treatment at the same time when we're not well. Our diet, lifestyle, and environment were also long ago recognized as major factors in health and healing. So from the point of view of Ayurveda, the pandemic is a result of poor governance. And this is what is written in the Charaka Samhita, a 3,000-year-old text. Poor governance, sinful living, and improper social mores, greed, and basically an abuse of the planet, a dysbiosis, a disruption in our pattern of harmony with the environment. And so we see that today. We're seeing that in any case, any instance of a pandemic, this is the problem. There's a very big disconnect that's not just a medical issue, but it's a social issue. And so when we live in harmony with nature and its cycles, this also keeps our own health in balance. And the word for immunity in Ayurveda is ojas. It's not a direct translation because it's one of these words that is a bit more maybe deep. Ojas is something that describes our vitality. It describes our capacity to resist illness, but also the amount of energy that we have to just live and flourish in life. And both immunity as a concept and ojas as a concept are the product of physiological transformation, meaning that it's what happens to the body after what you've eaten or after what you've been drinking or after your exercise and the exposure to the air and nature around you. It is the product of all of that. It's not something that stands alone. So it's always going to be seen as this kind of transformative process that we can build ongoingly. So what I'm outlining here in this presentation are contributing factors, not causal factors for your naturally strong immunity. So what that means is that all of these are building blocks that you can use to develop a really good, strong immune system. But independently taken alone, one or another thing is not sufficient to be the cause of good immunity. And because Ayurveda also looks at the whole individual, some people will be closer to really strong immunity already, and others will require much more work to build up that immunity. And that depends on the individual's nature, their history, their current situation, and many other factors that we'll see as well as we go through the presentation. So when we take all of this together, these are the foundations of a healthy lifestyle, and that supports our longevity and overall well-being. There's a word that is really helpful to describe the way that Ayurveda thinks, and that is prajna paradha. That means a crime against wisdom. And I love this concept because basically it's just telling us to act with common sense. And that Charaka, who is the original, the compiler, let's say, of the first or most important Ayurvedic medical text, has said that there are three causes of disease. And the first one is an unhealthy relationship to sense pleasures, like food, or too much laziness or enjoyment, and doing not enough exercise, for example, or consuming wine or consuming drugs because they numb. And so that unhealthy attachment leads to disease. And then another one is these crimes against wisdom themselves, which are doing the things that we know we shouldn't, and not doing the things that we know we should, basically. And so even things like when we're tired, not going to bed, this is considered to be a crime against wisdom. So Charaka says that will lead to disease. And then the last one that he indicated of the three causes of illness was that the concepts around time and motion, what we're doing, the busyness, how fast we do things, how much we put into each day, how we're rushing around, overactivity, overstimulation, doing things too fast, just like we see people doing all the time, kind of rushing from one appointment to another, or eating too fast, or not resting enough, not just slowing down and enjoying life here and there throughout the day, and certainly not being in sync with the time frame around the seasons and the daytime and in general in the climate. And so those three aspects are a major sort of background reason for illness. But Ayurveda also says that we become ill mostly because of a subtle cause. So the cause is very difficult to spot in the beginning. It can be emotional, or it can be an energetic cause, and that can be from a physical depletion, or it can be from an emotional shock. And then the disease comes from that. And that can be seen not only on an individual level, but also on a generalized level. So this kind of universal level where you have a kind of a malaise in society in general that is causing us to behave in a particular way. For example, if we're really not in a good place emotionally or psychologically, we make bad choices. You know, the food that you eat depends on how you feel, literally, because how you feel when you go shopping determines what you buy. And then by the time you get it home, how you feel when you're preparing your food will be impregnated in the food itself. And how you feel when you're eating the food will affect your digestion, for example. And so on and so on and so on. And so we can see that illness and health are very, very subtle concepts. They're things that we have to work on multiple different levels. The microbiome is a major aspect of health. I'm sure that you've all heard so many things about the microbiome. This is basically the intestinal flora is another way of describing that. And it is really 70 to 80% of our immune system. And so the health of the gut and the microbes that live in the gut is capital. It's extremely important for our overall well-being. So there are more bacteria in a space the width of your finger of human intestine than in the total number of humans that have ever been alive. And this is quite phenomenal because those bacteria are not you, they are inhabiting you. And yet they also basically dictate to you how you feel, what you'd like to eat. They sort of order food from their own needs, whether they are in or out of balance, that will determine the kind of food that you're craving and wanting to eat. And so that microbiome is animating you. You could almost think of the human aspect of yourself as like a puppet. And there's about 2% of you and about 90%, 98% of them when you look at that from a purely cellular level. And so these bacteria will either build us up or tear us down, depending on how they are and whether they are in or out of balance. And these bacteria will do very well when the diet and lifestyle supports them. They're predictors of disease as well. Now science can show, depending on what's going on in your gut and stool samples and the microbes in your gut, what kind of cancer you might get, what kind of disease you might be susceptible to. And so diseases that we are, for the past 20 years in the West, have been considering diseases of the brain or the nervous system are showing increasingly that there's a massive impact from this microbiome. So again, there's not one causal factor, but the microbiome is a significant causal factor. And there has been evidence of people reversing Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, so far not ALS, but they're otherwise quite debilitating and even deadly diseases, reversing them by changing diet, lifestyle, and then affecting the microbiome. So this is extremely important because these are becoming extremely deadly diseases. As people age, they're more and more common. And of course, cancer as well is becoming more and more common. So Ayurveda is all about a healthy daily routine. It sounds really simple. And the truth is that to be well, it is really simple. We don't have to do a lot of complicated things. And in fact, the best way to stay well is to live a very basic, simple life. It doesn't mean you can't have any fun or excitement in your life, but it means that the more you have predictability and structure in your life, the better you will function. And that applies at every age. And as soon as that is gone, there will be some kind of imbalance that emerges one way or the other. Some people respond better to structure, others find it too stabilizing and it feels like a restriction, but that can also be more of a psychological response to this structure that is not necessarily about whether they feel good in their body. So anyway, we're going to see here how important that is for our well-being, both from the scientific point of view as well as from the Ayurvedic point of view. So these regular patterns that we develop throughout the day really create the basis for our health. And certain times of day support certain types of functions in the body. So there's certain times of day where it's better to do things than others. Now, there's been some extraordinary sympathy from the medical and scientific community in the last few years when the Nobel Prize for Medicine was given out to 3 doctors for their work on the circadian rhythms. So for many, many years, I don't know, as long as I can remember, say 25, 30 years, there's been a lot of kind of mocking of biorhythms. So from certain medical parts of the medical establishment, there's been a certain amount of derision and mocking of this concept of biorhythm, almost thinking it was like a kind of a belief rather than anything that had any validity until this research. And you can see how recent it is. It's about 4 years ago. And so it takes a while for medical science to catch up with common sense, alas. And unfortunately, once research is done, it can also take a long time for practitioners to actually start applying the research because they're busy, they don't have time to keep up with all of the latest stuff. And also there's an actual hubris, this kind of resistance to doing the thing that they weren't taught at medical school, or challenging preconceived notions that they have about their own capacity, their own knowledge. And the more that medical research is demonstrating what is keeping us well, the more it falls back on what traditional healing methods have been saying for thousands of years. So this biorhythm, this internal clock, is part of all cellular life. So anything that you can describe as multicellular, whether it's an animal or a plant, a human being, these things all respond to the cycles of light and dark. And this is now regarded as a key feature of life. It's something that is not just a coincidence of timing, but it actually affects the biology of each of the cells. And so the body is actually anticipating the morning light and the evening light. It's not just reacting to that. The body is preparing for it, even though we may not mentally be aware at all. And this is where our intuition comes in, when we start to intuit that there's actually a change of energy happening. There's a kind of a slowing down, a different pace in the evening. There's an energy of softness in what Ayurveda would call kapha. This kapha energy is this kind of heavy and nourishing and grounding quality. And that happens in the evening as we're slowing down from the day and moving into the night. And it happens again in the morning as we're moving into the daytime. There's this kind of liminal phase, which is equally slow and nourishing and calming. And this is something that the body wakes up into, this kind of energy that is actually quite nourishing. And if we follow these rhythms, we can physically benefit. We can actually nourish ourselves physically, psychologically, emotionally by staying connected to these rhythms of these junction points in the daytime. And then these mechanisms actually trigger sleep patterns, body temperature changes, blood pressure changes, the insulin levels or blood sugar levels, and other hormones as well. Insulin is a hormone and other hormones are affected as well, and metabolism. And some doctors would even say that fertility is also an aspect of the circadian rhythms. One of the doctors, Dr. Michael Rosbach, said, one of the Nobel Prize winners said, you recognize circadian rhythms by the fact that you get sleepy at 10 or 11 at night. You wake up automatically at 7 in the morning. You have a dip in your alertness in the midday, maybe at 3 or 4 in the afternoon when you need a cup of coffee. So that's the clock. So what he's just described is something that Ayurveda has been describing in terms of its daily rhythm for, again, centuries. And our biorhythms, when they're in sync, when they work for us, they're going to leave us with more mental clarity, more feeling of alertness. It affects our hunger, the levels of hunger or not feeling hungry, metabolism, so fertility, as I mentioned, and mood, and all kinds of other physiological conditions. And so dinacharya is the word in Sanskrit for these daily habits. And this image that you see on the right is actually a kind of a way of looking at the day through the lens of the changing energies, according to Ayurveda. And so we see that at dawn, when you see that on the left, at roughly 6 a.m., this would be for a place where you have roughly 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of darkness. That applies through most countries that are close to the equator. And certainly, although India is not an equatorial country, it's close enough that it has roughly 12 or 13 hours of light a day. And so this is, of course, where this idea came from. So in Northern Europe, for example, we need to change it a little bit. We have to modify it according to what's actually happening outside the window, not according to this clock. So we don't want to get too fixated on the numbers, on the timing, but rather on the energy, what's shifting. And so you notice that the doctor had said, we know that we get tired around 10 or 11. And so that feeling of tiredness is our bedtime. And what Ayurveda says is we should really be asleep by that time. We should be in bed and asleep, because if we catch that wave of sleep, then by the time the daylight comes, by the time the dawn comes, we'll wake up spontaneously with the daylight. And then we can go through the day and have this energy in the morning, of this nourishing, calming energy to prepare ourselves for the day. We get more active later in the morning, and our appetite is very strong and digestion is very strong, while the sun is also very strong. And then we can be active, but maybe in a slightly different way in the afternoon. Maybe it's much more about doing things physically. Maybe it's more about connecting with people rather than doing mental work, for example, or physical labor. And then in the evening, just before dusk, ideally we should eat our last meal. So most beneficial is to not eat when it's dark. And of course, again, in Europe, this is difficult because throughout the year we have such a wide variety of timings. And so it can be dark at 4:30 in the afternoon, and then in the summertime it's 10 or 10:30. So that again has to go with your lifestyle, has to go with what's possible for you. But we're looking at this as a kind of ideal scenario. And the evening should be, again, a preparation for winding down rather than when you would do quite a lot of activity, having lots of lights on, especially eating or doing things like that will keep stimulating the body at a time when you really just need to go to sleep. And so we see that Ayurveda was absolutely in sync with what now has been understood to be Nobel Prize winning science. Eating well is also a really important concept in good immune health. And by eating well, I'm not talking about necessarily the foods, although that is, of course, part of it, but it's the manner in which we eat. So it's not only the food that we eat, but the way that we eat that affects our health. And that means that we're eating in such a way that we can actually digest our food, that we can eliminate well, that we can process the food that we've consumed, and that we don't burden the body with undigested food that actually becomes like a toxin in the system. This is what in Western medicine would be known as inflammation, and in the Ayurvedic tradition would be known as ama. So recent research tells us that there is a change, or at least an influence on our internal clock, on this biological clock. Whenever the timing of meals or the size and quantity of food that we're eating at one meal or another goes out of balance. So imagining, for example, when you're traveling, when we travel, and especially if we go into a different time zone, our meal times might be all over the place. And if you, for example, in an airplane, sometimes you might be served a meal when it's absolutely not mealtime for the place that you were in. And it's better not to eat then. It's better not to take the meal just because it's there, but really think, where is my body right now? What kind of time is my body connected to at this point? And just continue to respect that. And of course, if we're overeating regularly, this is also going to throw out the biorhythm, because by overeating, what that's doing is it's pushing digestion forward. It's taking longer to digest the meal because it's more difficult to consume. And that means that the next meal will either be too much food and continuing the problem of digestion, or the next meal won't be desired and therefore we skip a meal. And then meals start to become irregular. And that becomes problematic overall for the biorhythms, for this inner clock that we have. And Ayurveda would say very much the same. Ayurveda says, eat at regular meal times as much as you can. Avoid snacking and digest the previous meal before you eat the next one. And if you look at your hands and make fists, if you look at two of your fists, that's the size of your stomach when it's absolutely full. So if you look at the quantity that might represent on a plate, then notice how much food you might need. And you might even not need that much. That might be too much for you. But notice that it's probably less than very often you might be taking or perhaps being served if you're in a restaurant. So we eat until the stomach is about half full. You eat until you feel you've had enough rather than till you feel full. And you drink a quarter of the volume of your stomach in liquid. That could be warm water, for example, or some kind of herbal tea. And then you leave space, a quarter of that space, because there's a process of combustion that's necessary. And for breakfast, eat something light and nourishing that's appropriate for you and for the season as well. And lunch should really be the biggest meal of the day, should be the most sustaining meal of the day. And that's the time when you would eat things that are more difficult to digest, more heavy foods, for example. And dinner should be early and light. And by following that rhythm, you'll find that your digestion changes dramatically. And that even without trying, you can shed weight if you're holding on to weight. And of course, sleeping well is another major aspect in immunity. To get good sleep is difficult in our modern life, in our modern world. So it's really helpful that you set yourself some parameters. Go to bed early so that helps you with the proper digestion and assimilation of food and to let your body repair and regenerate itself. There's a lot of work going on in the body when we're sleeping. And it only can happen to the best effect if we follow that sleeping regimen that is now acclaimed by Nobel Prize winning science that says get to bed at 10. And if you get to bed around that time, you're really hitting this kind of peak moment where you're going to be involved in the deep sleep cycle, getting the most deep, nourishing sleep, and the liver will be able to do its job. And so getting to bed at 10 o'clock also means that you don't get this second wind, making you feel active again. And once that time has passed where you do get into the second wind, it's very difficult to get good quality sleep after that. And so don't push through the night. Don't push through and watch the end of the film or read the end of the chapter or stay out later in the evening than you really need to. And again, we can't be perfect. There's just no way. So what we have to do is we take it as much as we can. We take it as far as we can. And if you can do it like 80% of the time, you'll find that your health is just fantastic. And the other 20% of the time is the occasional time when you stay up late or you do something that is a little bit atypical, but it's not going to be a major drama. To be sure, a healthy person has a healthy sleeping pattern. So if the sleeping pattern is off, we can say that the health is not good. Inadequate sleep and irregular sleeping patterns are linked with health problems due to increased inflammation and suppressed immune function. So for good immunity, we definitely need to sleep. And it's really as much about quality of sleep as well as the quantity. The quantity of sleep takes care of itself when you're getting good quality sleep. So don't worry so much about the hours, but think about how you feel when you wake up. So science will say that there's many studies on sleep. Like it's just an incredible industry in science now at the moment. So you can find whatever topic you want right now to understand about sleep. But science will say that there are all these things that we're doing, which then Ayurveda calls prajna paradha, which is this crime against wisdom, which is things like what they describe as social jet lag, meaning that you work 9 to 5 throughout the week, go to bed at a normal time, and then Friday comes, and Friday you stay up until 2 in the morning, and you eat at 11 o'clock at night, and you sleep in until 9 a.m. or something. And so you're completely pulling yourself out of your biorhythm, and you're doing that deliberately. You're doing that yourself. It's not because you're traveling. And so this is why they describe it as social jet lag. Shift work is problematic for sleep as well. Obviously, that's a difficult situation because if that's the kind of job that people do, that's a choice in terms of the job. So that always will pose health problems for people who work shift work. And any caregiving obligations, if you've got young babies or seniors or ill people at home that you need to tend to at different hours of the day, then that's going to disturb your sleep as well. And of course, traveling, we know that will disturb us. And then what and when we eat also determines how we sleep and how well our sleep is going to serve us. Are we going to wake up rested? So definitely, science agrees with Ayurveda. Says avoid evening meals. Don't snack. Don't eat anything. They again, science has said explicitly 3 hours before bedtime. Ayurveda agrees with that as well. What this also does, if you eat in the evening, is it starts to increase your blood sugar levels. So insulin increases because each time you eat, however small the morsel of food, your blood sugar will spike. And this really prevents the body from doing its job of cleaning up. So the body uses the nighttime to cleanse itself from the daytime. And so if you're eating really late and you go to sleep with a full stomach, your body doesn't have that opportunity to detox and cleanse itself and regenerate the cells. And then over a period of time, these lifestyle imbalances will cause metabolic changes, and that leads to obesity, heart disease, cancer, all of these major diseases. So this is not a minor thing. This is actually a really important thing. And these are entirely within our control. So to sleep well, Ayurveda would say go to bed early and try to go to bed at the same time each night. If you're roughly, within a half hour or hour, the same time each night, you'll find that you naturally will wake up at a particular time the next morning. It becomes a really interesting exploration of your own biorhythm to see that when you go to bed, when you're tired and catching the first wave of fatigue, you tend to get into the cycles of sleep that you need and will just wake up naturally feeling refreshed once you've had enough of those cycles. So rather than counting hours, try to focus on when to get to bed. Just put yourself to bed. And then, as the science agrees, leaving 3 or more hours between your last meal and bedtime is very important for good sleep. Don't go to sleep on a full stomach. And avoid daytime sleeping. So Ayurveda is not very big on napping during the day. Resting, for sure. Resting is very, very good. But napping is considered to be disruptive to the biorhythms. So that's not the case if you're ill, if you have been sleep deprived, if you didn't get much sleep the night before and you need to make up for that, or if you're traveling, for example, or if it's the peak of summer and it's really hot, then you're welcome to sleep because that's the best way for the body to cope with the heat. And also, if you need to sleep during the day, let's say you've just had a meal, the best thing to do is sit upright. So you sit in a comfortable chair and just kind of doze, kind of like your grandfather did, and just let yourself doze. So don't lie down. And lying down will have a complete shutdown effect on the digestive system. And you'll wake up feeling heavy, groggy, like serious brain fog. What Ayurveda would call a kapha imbalance. And so to avoid that, you stay upright, allow the body to completely rest. You're going into a kind of a semi-sleeping state. And so you recover some of the fatigue, but you don't disrupt your digestion. And then also for sleeping well, having a ritual at bedtime is really helpful for something that keys you into your bedtime, meaning meditation, pranayama, which is the breathing exercises, and some personal hygiene thing that you might like to do. That's a really good way of triggering the bedtime feeling. And then wake up at or before dawn. And so to train yourself to sleep well, you will probably need to use an alarm if you're not waking up naturally, but use the alarm and wake yourself up at that period around dawn. And again, it depends on the season, it depends on your lifestyle, but be regular about both waking up and sleeping. And even if for a couple of days you're tired, you force yourself to wake up at a specific time so that you're tired enough in the evening that you go to bed earlier. And this will gradually shift your biorhythms. So sleeping is often difficult because of stress. So if we look at ways to reduce stress, there's some really simple things that you can do throughout the day. One is to shake your body. Shaking and dancing immediately will reduce stress in the body. Jumping up and down, really easy to reduce stress in the body. It immediately lowers cortisol and adrenaline. And that shaking is done. I have a dog, and when I see she gets upset with other dogs and she gets really scared, for example, or she starts barking at a dog, and there's a lot of tension that builds up between them. And then when that's over and that dissipates, a couple of seconds later, she'll stop and shake herself off. And all animals do this. And humans, because we're so highly sophisticated and socialized, we don't do this anymore. And so what happens is we hold on to that anxiety and tension. And especially if there's been a big shock, a physical shock or an emotional shock, we need to move the body. We need to move ourselves through it. And of course, dancing falls into that category as well. So just jump around, jump to your favorite song, or just dance, just enjoy dancing. And that is a great way of reducing stress. But you can do this within 30 to 60 seconds by just shaking the body all over the place and jumping up and down. And then belly breathing is a fantastic way of reducing stress. So imagine you're lying in bed and you can't fall asleep. You can just observe your belly, your abdomen expanding as you inhale, really breathing deeply into the base of the abdomen and relaxing as you exhale. Take a good deep inhalation through the nose. If you like, you exhale through the mouth and you slow your breathing down, and you'll really feel the energy shifting. You can do this sitting, you can do it lying down. It really doesn't matter, but you can you can shift yourself out of the sympathetic nervous system and into the relaxation response within about 60 seconds. And then journaling has been shown to, within 3 days, affect your stress levels profoundly. So you can have a dialogue with your emotions, for example. You do about 20 minutes of journaling a day. The researchers found that after 3 days of doing 20 minutes, 3 days in a row, that the anxiety and stress levels had diminished, both subjectively and objectively in the people in the study. And when you have this process of exploring, either just simply being exploring your emotions through whatever you write, or having a dialogue with your emotions, you start to understand how you feel, and that changes the way that you feel. So imagine that you're feeling anxiety and you would write down, so, Susan, this is my line. Susan will say, gosh, I'm feeling so worried about this thing. I'm so anxious that this thing is happening and I don't know what to do about it. And anxiety responds, you pretend your anxiety and you say, well, of course you're worried about it. There's a lot hanging on this. This is a big job interview, or this is, something you've never done before and you're just scared. So that's natural that and so you have this really basic conversation with yourself in the form of journaling. And that has been shown to be very, very effective in reducing stress. And journaling before bedtime is something that is known to allow people to sleep better. That's, again, been studied thoroughly. Fasting is it's very popular these days. It's it's a great thing that it's popular because it's extremely beneficial. But fasting is also something that is integral to humanity. We've been fasting as a species for thousands of years. Sometimes because there was no food around, and other times because we chose to slow things down for religious purposes or some kind of acknowledgement of a ceremony, or in what we would consider, sadly, primitive cultures, when people were not feeling well, they would stop eating. And of course, that's what all animals do. And nowadays, people don't really have that signal anymore. They don't have that sense that they should stop eating when they're not feeling well, whether it's emotionally unwell or physically unwell. And so people continue to consume food and even over-consume food, and especially consume the wrong foods, like lots of carbs and the wrong kind of junk foods, because they're not feeling well. And this will really diminish immunity. So by fasting, we increase immunity. It's just extraordinary how all of the markers for inflammation and disease almost disappear after a course of fasting. That can be anything from 4 days, even the benefits are there already after 2 days, but 4 days, 21 days of fasting. And fasting can take different shapes. It doesn't have to be no food at all. It can be a number of different ways of fasting. So there are fasts with only water, for example, which is quite strong, quite extreme. That I would only recommend if you're not well. If you are really, you've just been given a diagnosis or you're really not well and you know you just have to recover, you just put yourself to bed and don't take anything but warm liquids, perhaps with some salt or lemon and nothing more. And otherwise, fasting with vegetable juices is helpful, or fasting with simple foods. So you take a particular food item and you focus on that. And again, this is Nobel Prize winning stuff. So the Nobel Prize for what's known as physiology and medicine, in the category of autophagy, the study was done on autophagy, which means literally the body eating itself, the body eliminating tissue, its own cellular waste. And this is, again, very recent, 5 years ago, 2016. The understanding is that the body, when we're at a fasting state, takes the opportunity of this message that there's nothing coming in and says, okay, we want the most efficient cells that we've got then, and we're going to clear out the dross. We're going to clear out everything that's not efficient. And so it will start to consume all of the cells that are either sluggish or outdated or maybe dying off. And the body will literally start to eat itself, which is one of the reasons why people quickly lose weight when they fast, because it starts to use up a lot of the tissue that otherwise just kind of hangs around while we're constantly feeding the body. Fasting is the only way for an adult to actually regenerate cells in this way. Babies and children are doing it all the time. That's what makes them grow so fast. I remember when my children were babies, I would put them down for a nap, and literally 3 hours later, they would wake up and they would be bigger. And it was truly mind blowing because you could actually see them growing into their pajamas in the course of a nap, which is pretty amazing stuff. But as adults, of course, all of that slows down by the sort of 20s. That's not happening anymore. And so the only way for adults to be able to regenerate and rejuvenate themselves is to fast. It also, studies have shown that it improves mood and a subjective sense of well-being. So it means the participants in the studies all said they felt better. It objectively, we can see it improves metabolism, it lowers inflammation markers, lowers insulin, reduces blood cells because of that process of autophagy, or what is called apoptosis, which is that recycling process that activates stem cells. So that it means that new growth is possible. So fasting is really the one thing to do if you're not well. Just shut the store down and no, take nothing in until you feel better. And Ayurveda would say very much the same thing. Fasting is extremely important, but it's done a little bit differently in the context of Ayurveda. So unless you're ill, it's recommended to consume something during the fast. So either simple foods that could be like really mushy, soupy rice, or just rice water, for example, or some kind of liquids, that broth, or again juices, or that kind of thing that would allow you to just keep the electrolytes going. And of course, if you're ill, then you don't have to consume anything at all. Intermittent fasting is inherent to an Ayurvedic lifestyle. So it's not a new thing. Again, this idea of intermittent fasting is just the way people were 40, 50 years ago. That's how people lived. My grandparents certainly weren't snacking their way through the day. So intermittent fasting is what? It means having lots of time between meals. And that can be a substantial amount of time, like, for example, eating your dinner at 5 in the evening and then not taking any food again until the next day at, say, 11, which gives you 18 hours without food. Or it could be something a little more regular, meaning that you have your dinner at 6 and the next day you wake up and you have your breakfast at like 7 or 8 o'clock. And that's so 12, 13, 14 hours without food. That's already really good. And for many people, that is not happening because of all of the snacking. The other thing is between the meals, making sure that there's enough time, that there's 3, 4, 5 hours between each meal. So your body is really hungry by the time you eat something again. And Ayurveda says that 2 meals a day are often enough for most people, depending on the age, obviously, not for children, not for teens, and depending on your activity level. So if you're very busy, if you're a laborer, or if you're working hard in the fields or something, you need more food, and so you eat whatever you need to eat. But for most of us, 2 meals a day would be plenty. Or it could be two bigger meals and one very small one, for example. But Ayurveda doesn't say expressly have X number of meals. It really is, again, about individually adjusting what's necessary according to need. And so in your day-to-day life, if you just follow that rule of eating only when you're hungry, you'll have the benefits of fasting. You'll already have those benefits because it's built into our human biology. And a mono diet is another good way of getting the benefits of fasting and yet also having calories. So there's another research that's been done recently, 3, 4 years ago, on fasting mimicking diets, which is to really restrict calories down to anywhere between 500 and 1200 calories a day for about 5 days. And in that process of restricting, the body is acting as if it's fasting. And so you're still getting 1 meal a day and you're still getting some nutritional benefit as well. Breathe. This is another massive, very important aspect of immunity. So breathing is the number one way to detoxify the body. It's far more important than, for example, defecating or urinating or sweating. Breathing is the most important way to detoxify. And when it's not complete, when it's not a full deep breath, you're not getting that function of detoxification. And simple breath awareness has the benefit of calming the body and mind as well and reducing stress, which also improves immunity. And breathing deeply shifts us away from that tension, this fight or flight tension of the sympathetic nervous system, which shuts down your immunity, and it shifts into the parasympathetic, which supports your immunity. And there are so many studies on breathing as well, because breathing is known now, it's just indisputable how important that is to our overall health. And breathing techniques are really effective against a lot of modern illnesses that cause immunosuppression, anxiety, insomnia. It gives an immediate increase of energy and it improves the metabolism. And these breathing practices, of most of the studies are centered on very simple breaths that are either deep belly breathing or what is called nadi shodhana, which is alternate nostril breathing. That is by far the most studies that are being done on these two types of breath. And there, of course, are other ways of breathing. For example, the longer exhalation has also been studied, so that the inhale is whatever it is, let's say a count of 5, and the exhalation is count of 7 or maybe 8. And just continuing with that balance allows for more nitric oxide to accumulate in the body, which actually is improving the cardiovascular system. And it also, by the way, that was also a Nobel Prize winning study that showed that nitric oxide is very important to lower inflammation. And that, of course, improves immunity. So health understanding is really now much more clear. The mechanisms of health and immunity are much more clear around these very basic things that humans do. And then that slow, deep breathing, like I suggested, for example, if sleeping is the problem, improves vagal tone. And that improves overall immunity as well. The vagus nerve system is what innervates the stomach and the diaphragm and the whole mechanism of breathing and relaxation. And it allows you to stay alert, happy, well, and also suppresses immunity. It suppresses inflammation, which boosts your immunity. And so, of course, Ayurveda has a lot to say on breathing. Ayurveda is considered a sister science to yoga, and many of the therapeutic treatments are regarding some kind of yogic practice. And so breathing is a fundamental part of that. Ayurveda suggests breathing practices should be done regularly, so morning and evening. And if stress and anxiety actually disrupt your digestion, if you find that that's a regular problem, you can do a couple of minutes and even like 60 seconds of alternate nostril breathing or simple deep abdominal breathing before you eat. And you'll find that it changes everything in the way that you approach your meal. Taking a gentle walk outside after each meal and breathing really deeply and consciously will also really bring you benefit. And these are things you integrate into your day. You don't have to do anything extra. Pranayama, the practice of breathing, this techniques of breathing, if you like, actually means to extend vital energy. So prana is this life force or energy, vitality, and ayama means to lengthen. And there's another way of, because it's Sanskrit, there's always 36 different ways of taking words apart. In Sanskrit, there's another way of looking at the word pranayama, which is that it's prana, of course, life force and energy, and yama, meaning that you're controlling. So yama is actually also can represent death, but it's also like the restrictions of something. So another way of translating this is to restrict the life force. And by that, the meaning is that you're holding your breath or counting your breath or delaying the breath or managing the breath in some way. It doesn't mean restricting the breath to not breathe, but to adjust the breathing. But I prefer this way of looking at pranayama because this is really what the result is. The end result of doing these breathing techniques is that you have better vital energy and a longer, healthier life. A plant-based diet is also a key to really good health and strong immunity. That doesn't mean you have to be vegan or vegetarian, but it means that most of what you eat should be plant-based. And there's so much research on this, it's almost ridiculous. So we really need to aim as much as possible to eat healthy, fresh, whole foods in season and that we can actually digest. So you want to start to get intuitive with yourself and start to realize, am I digesting this or is this really not working for me? And by digesting, that means that you're going to be feeling relatively quickly after the food, meaning an hour or 2 hours later, you're feeling light. There's no kind of heaviness or tension in the stomach. You feel good energy, constant energy. There's no slump, no feeling of up and down kind of energy after eating. There's no achiness in the body, etc., etc. So that means that you're digesting well. And the closer to home your food is grown, the more nutritional value it's going to have. So if you're getting, I don't know, like vegetables from Ecuador or something, by the time they arrive in your kitchen, it could be weeks have gone by since that vegetable actually saw the original plant that it grew on. And so you're really not getting anywhere near the nutritional value of the food. And this also has an impact on our environment, which of course has an impact on our health. And so a plant-based diet is the environmentally friendly diet, it's the digestively friendly diet, and it's one of the easiest ones to do if you want to eat locally. Eating lots and lots of vegetables improves your digestion. It increases your energy because your body's processing the food and getting dense nutrition at the same time. It improves sleep as well. And it significantly improves general health and vitality and even mental health because you're not so dull and heavy compared to eating a lot of other more processed foods or heavy foods like animal foods. So there are to date, about 5,000 studies, that's one estimate, and still growing. There's just constant study going on around food. We're somehow, as a species, we're obsessed with food. And plants of all kinds, vegetables and spices and so on, have on average 64 times more antioxidant power than meat, poultry, fish, dairy, and eggs. And that means it's blocking oxidative stress, which is what damages cells. That's what breaks cells down. It makes you age. It makes you all wrinkly. It makes you just look old, changes the color of your hair, and so on. And so when there's high oxidation, we're also more susceptible to disease. So the immune system is weak. And this diet, a plant-based diet, can actually prevent, treat, or reverse many leading causes of death: heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and high blood pressure. And it is the only diet that has actually been shown to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients. There's some crazy number like 85% of patients who go on a vegan diet, which is proposed by Dr. Andrew Weil of the United States. That's WEIL. He is the original proponent of this for heart disease patients and has done many, many, many studies over the past 30 or 40 years that has become just absolute dogma now, even in the medical establishment. So now it's just known that if somebody has a tendency towards heart disease, they should really switch to, at least temporarily, to a plant-based diet. And that, of course, improves your body weight, but it's not just the weight, it's the composition of the body. The body changes shape, it changes composition. There's less puffiness in the body when you eat plant-based foods. It improves insulin and cholesterol, as well as emotional states, including depression, anxiety, fatigue, and giving an overall sense of well-being and better daily functioning. So that people say there's less stiffness and less muscle pain, for example, when they're on a plant-based diet. And Ayurveda also has a lot to say about the ideal diet, because Ayurveda is very much focused on food as the primary target for good health. And it recommends what is called a sattvic diet. So sattva means calm, peaceful, quiet, balanced, and harmonious. This, again, it's a Sanskrit word, which means that there's loads of definitions, hard to translate into one, but it basically means a healthy, balanced diet. And that means fresh seasonal foods that are easy for the body to assimilate and digest, and mostly vegetarian. So Ayurveda is not the same as yoga. There is no moral code in Ayurveda in terms of what you eat. You eat whatever you want, and Ayurveda will tell you how to digest it best and how to balance it according to what's going on in your body and in your life. And yet the sattvic diet is mostly vegetarian. So meat can definitely be taken if you want that. If you are a meat eater, ideally eat that at the daytime meal, at the midday meal, where you have good digestion and you can fully digest it then before going to bed. And that eating meat is especially recommended for soldiers, for example, and laborers. That's explicitly mentioned in the Charaka Samhita. And it's also good for people who are convalescing, even if you are a vegetarian. When I was in burnout, for example, I did a 3-week cure, or maybe it was a 2-week cure, 2 or 3 weeks of red meat, which was a way of building vigor and energy in the body. That's not necessary when you're in good health. If you're in good health, you don't have to eat meat, but meat is a good medicine when you need it. And generally, Ayurveda says that a combination of grains and vegetables should make up most of your diet. And then, of course, spices. Spice is just so amazing. It's such an easy way to stay healthy. It's an interesting way to stay healthy as well. It adds flavor and interest to your meals, and different spices will improve digestion. They stimulate the digestive fire and the gastric juices, and it nourishes the intestinal flora as well. Almost all of them have this function. And many spices are antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal as well. So again, just a huge array of studies, but just very recently, a couple of years ago, or even it was in 2019, I think, a recent study by the universities of Florida, Gainesville, and Pennsylvania State demonstrated that cloves, especially ginger, turmeric, and rosemary, significantly blocked the inflammatory response in the body at modest levels. So literally at simple day-to-day consumption levels. You don't have to take 5 tablespoons or something. It's just a half to 1 teaspoon a day of these things, and you will have a significant change in your body's inflammatory response. And so all you have to do is add spices in to whatever you're already eating, and add them to your teas, add them to your drinks, add them to your recipes, and try to eat really fresh, especially freshly ground spices for the most value, for the most nutritional uptake. Of course, Ayurveda is all about spices. A lot of the medicine that Ayurveda uses is based on spices, because spices actually are like medicine. They're not just the standard food, but it is literally something we can heal ourselves with. They should be in every meal. According to Ayurveda, we should never have a meal without spice. You should never, for example, just eat steamed or boiled vegetables. That is difficult for the body. It seems like a simple meal, but it's actually difficult for the body to assimilate. So if you just add then some oil and add some spices on that, then your body's going to be much more balanced. And then all six tastes should be present for balanced nutrition. So you know that when you have all the six tastes, you're getting something from all the different types of food categories, and that will increase your chances of getting better nutrition. And it also makes you feel full. It makes you feel like you've had enough when you've had all these tastes, instead of emphasizing, like we do often in the West, sweet and salty and sour things. You must also add bitter, pungent, and astringent things. And so bitter is it can be a number of different things. It can be vegetables like bitter gourd, or it can be rucola, or it could be even coffee. Black chocolate is bitter, so doesn't mean that you have to eat those things, but those things they can be a part of a healthy diet if you have them in a little quantity. And then pungent foods, pungent things are very strong spices. For example, ginger is a pungent spice. Hing or asafoetida is a pungent spice. Um, and astringent foods are things that pull the liquid out of your mouth. So things like lemons or cucumbers, or you have astringency also in spices like turmeric and neem are astringent. And so combining all those different things in your meal will really help you to not only feel better overall and enjoy your food more overall, but also to boost your immunity and digest better. Warming spices are really helpful because they change our feeling, the biology in the body. So that's really good for people who tend to feel cold, and especially in Northern Europe, we have this quite a lot. Or if you have sluggish digestion, you want warming spices, things like cinnamon, ginger, turmeric again. And they should be minimized, or at least kind of taken in moderation by those kinds of people who are hot, people who have a lot of heat in the stomach, or who tend to get hot at the neck, or hot face, or generally feeling hot, hot head, or who have fast digestion. If you tend to more towards diarrhea than constipation, then you should avoid those heating spices. That obviously includes things like piment, like the red peppers and green peppers and things too. And spices should always be taken as food. They should never be taken separately as a supplement. You can see that quite often now. This is another one of those modern preconceptions around Ayurveda, that it's like Ayurveda means that you take these supplements. And that's even something that is done in the Indian culture. There's people who are, trying to make some good money, and they'll say, well, here I have Ayurvedic supplements for you. And in fact, what it is it's just one thing. It'll be turmeric in capsules, and that's not helpful. So you can definitely take medicine that is several things, several spices together, most beneficially in a kind of not a capsule form, but in a pill form, where you can still taste the spices, whatever it is, so that your body's already processing the spice at the beginning of the digestive process, and not bypassing that, because that activation of saliva, the activation of the digestion, is an important part of assimilating the thing. It's also overheating for the liver. It's too much heat. The liver has to process everything that we eat. And if you give it a shock, like 4 tablets of turmeric or something like that, it just can't handle it. It's too much. And so you're actually causing some trouble rather than getting the benefit of the turmeric. So just eat it. Here's a list of 9 spices which I think everybody should be using if not every day, every other day at least. So turmeric, black pepper, cumin, ginger, cinnamon, clove, garlic, coriander, and I wrote coriander twice. What I mean by that is coriander in terms of the seeds and powder, and coriander leaves. So the last one should be coriander leaves. And so if you have all of these things in your diet, most of the time, you're going to get this incredible array of superfoods. You'll be amazed at how much benefit just these spices will bring. And then, of course, everything else that you might like as well. And then, of course, there's rosemary and oregano that you can also add for more European tastes that also have amazing powers. Hydration is hugely important. So drinking water is really essential to your immunity. It provides better blood circulation. Your blood is, of course, like 85% water. Uh, so, um, so that is necessary for proper circulation, for lymph drainage. So the lymph is something that is difficult to move anyway. It doesn't have a heart that pumps it through. So the lymph is already having a little bit of work to actually move through the body. Needs your movement, and it needs hydration to drain itself and to function properly. And that also is going to affect the elimination of urine, sweat, and feces. And that all depends on how much you drink. And again, hydration has been studied to the moon and back, and we have a lot to rely on that says staying well hydrated is very important for detoxification pathways. That's all those complex organs that work together, whether it be just simply from the stomach and processing the food that you're eating, or the liver that's trying to extract any toxins and and try and divide up for the rest of the body what that might need. Things like the kidneys really require proper hydration to function well. Kidney disease is often a result of poor hydration. And then, of course, the lymphatic drainage and clearing of pathogens and waste materials. So lymph clears out toxins. That's a really important function of lymph. But also the bacterial, the unfriendly bacteria, the pathogens that are naturally in the body, if they're not flushed out of the body along with other waste materials, then they're going to linger and proliferate. We feel muscle tension, anxiety, dizziness, headaches, and serotonin, which is produced in the liver, in the gut, rather, to a high degree. I think it's 60 or 70% of serotonin is produced, or maybe it's even up to 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. I've forgotten the exact number, but it's a majority of it. And then you'll feel digestive upset when you're not hydrating properly. Sometimes people confuse thirst and hunger. And so just check before you eat that you should have a little drink. And we'll see what Ayurveda says about that as well. So dehydration allows accumulation of toxins in the colon, which is really dangerous, because once those toxins and the unfriendly bacteria start to accumulate, they might back up into the small intestine, and you get a condition called SIBO, or the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and that is really unhelpful. It becomes really a major problem for immunity, because it makes you susceptible to all kinds of things, from allergies to autoimmune disease. And so we definitely want to stay hydrated to avoid all that. There's a quote from Dr. Hiromi Shinya, who does a lot of work on hydration. He's written some books, and says if enough water is not consumed, the bronchial mucous membranes dehydrate and dry out. And phlegm and mucus are produced in the bronchial tube, but if there's not enough water, they'll stick to the bronchial tube and make it a breeding ground for bacteria and viruses. So this is really important nowadays, where we're experiencing this COVID crisis, where we know that it's airborne, and we know that there's a potential for breathing it in through the mouth or the nose. And so staying hydrated also helps the mucus do its job and clear the pathways. And Ayurveda is very explicit on how to drink properly, how to hydrate the body. There's a bit of an art to the Ayurvedic way of drinking water. The idea is that it's very helpful for all the systems that you drink first thing in the morning. The understanding being that after a long night of sleep, the body is somewhat dehydrated. And so the first thing that you should do is take a half a liter or so of plain warm water, nothing in it, no lemon, nothing else, just plain warm water. And you can have whatever else you want after that, but this will help to hydrate the body without starting the process of digestion. Just allows the body pure hydration. Um, and then you can sip that warm water throughout the day to keep yourself hydrated. So every 10, 15 minutes, just take a sip. I keep a thermos close by so that I have this option constantly to be sipping. And again, it's just warm water. There's nothing in it. Sometimes I'll take a herbal tea, kind of infusion, but most of the time it's just warm water. And then drink your water or infusions 15 to 30 minutes before a meal or an hour after meals. And especially if you're looking to lose weight, there are great studies that show that if you drink warm water, or actually any water, 30 minutes before a meal or 15 to 30 minutes before, you will actually trigger metabolism. Your digestive system is being prepped for food, and you will eat less. And so it's really good to do that as a practice if you're looking to balance your weight. And then when you're taking a meal, don't drink a lot. Just drink a little bit. We saw that only a quarter of the stomach is there for any kind of liquid. Just take about 100 milliliters. It's a very small glass, maybe warm water or maybe an infusion. Or if you're drinking wine, Ayurveda would say don't, but if you're drinking wine, just take a small glass of wine and enjoy that, and not too much, because otherwise you're really diluting the digestive juices by drinking too much. And you won't hydrate yourself properly. You'll simply stop digestion. And for this same reason, we avoid cold beverages, and especially avoiding cold beverages when you're eating. So we see why there's so many chronic illnesses today. We see that the average Western, well, even now all over the world, we see people will take like a cold soft drink with ice along with a hamburger or and French fries or whatever. So they're literally, what happens to fat when it gets cold. It's no different in your stomach. So fat congeals when it gets cold, it gets solid, and the body cannot deal with that. And so you're asking the body either to try and heat, using all of its energy to heat this digestive system that is now trying to break down cold fat and cold drinks, and then stop doing all the other functions. And so it's a really helpful thing for the body to drink something that is at least room temperature, if not warm, and avoid or minimize tea and coffee and sweet drinks and alcohol. Oh, I spelled alcohol. That was after a glass of wine, I guess. And I want to give a special shout out to green tea, although I've just said don't drink tea. But if you drink green tea in moderation, meaning 1 or 2 cups a day, it's actually an incredible superfood. It's an incredible health food. The way that Asians often drink green tea is very, very small cups, like tiny little bowls, along with a meal. And so don't drink like a pot of tea or one of these giant Western-sized mugs, but drink a small cup of green tea, one or two a day, and you're going to find, again, that you get fantastic benefits for the immune system. It has fantastic effects on blood sugar, blood pressure. It's really good for people who have H. pylori bacter, which causes ulcers in the stomach. And it reduces inflammation. So green tea is anti-inflammatory. It's a fantastic thing to have with a meal that might also contain inflammatory foods, because then you're starting to combat that inflammation right in the same meal. Prevents gum disease, cavities, and even bad breath. And that's because it's helping with your digestive process, and bad breath comes from poor digestion. It's not coming from the mouth. And so it's just packed with nutrients, vitamins, minerals, especially manganese and potassium, zinc, niacin, folic acid, and vitamin C. You prepare it at less than boiling temperature. It's really important not to boil the kettle and pour that right on the green tea, because the leaves will be overcooked, and then that actually damages the effects of the beneficial effects of the tea. So 85 degrees means that probably about 5 minutes has passed between boiling the kettle and actually pouring. And sometimes some people have these kettles that actually have a specific temperature, so you can just set it to the temperature necessary. And matcha is a really interesting thing that is a whole food. So matcha is actually the entire leaf, and it's ground into a powder. And if you drink matcha, it's a much more rich flavor. You get far more of the polyphenols that are in the green tea, and even more nutritional and antioxidant benefits. But it's a kind of a different drink. And so just don't take it the way that it's become popular in the West, meaning that it's served as a latte. And so just take it the traditional way, take it the traditional Japanese way. To prepare it requires only water and the matcha and then a whisk, and you blend it together. And you'll find that that is another great source of nourishment and a great source of hydration as well. Green tea, if you take too much, is dehydrating because, as I mentioned this word before, this astringency. Astringent foods dehydrate when there's too much of them. So we want a little bit of them, but we don't want too much of them. And again, if you take just I don't know, 1 or 2 little cups of green tea a day, it's enough. Just don't go overboard. Healthy fats are extremely important for good immunity. So the body really requires healthy fats to function well, and the brain especially delights in fat. It is mostly fat, and it needs fat to nourish itself. And of course, the whole nervous system, the actual nerve endings require fat, and they require, in fact, cholesterol to function properly. So a lot of what we've been told about fat and cholesterol and so on is incredibly misguided, and it has caused a lot of illness because people have substituted healthy fats for unhealthy fats or no fat at all, which means that the body is incredibly depleted. So when you have healthy fats with a meal, you feel more full, and you therefore don't feel like snacking. And when you balance out your meals and you start to add healthy fats, then you don't need as much food as well. You just feel much better with less food. It immediately lowers blood sugar. So right away after the meal, you can see blood sugar spikes. For example, if you have basmati rice, plain basmati rice, if you have rice with nothing on it, it's actually a high glycemic food and it spikes insulin. If you have basmati with a bit of ghee or a bit of olive oil, that cuts the glycemic index in half. And of course, the fats, especially the healthy fats, improve metabolism. That's, again, sounds very paradoxical, but it's true. And having high blood sugar levels after eating is linked to health problems, especially diabetes, because of the raise in insulin, the chronic high insulin, and heart disease and obesity as well. When there's too much sugar in the blood, then the body stores it. It doesn't know what to do with it because it's consuming rapid sugar as you're eating, as opposed to consuming the fat, which is a longer burning fuel. So healthy fats are things like avocado oil, so either the actual whole avocado or the oil of avocado, which is great to cook with. Nuts have really healthy fats. Olives, so of course olive oil is great. Better not to cook with virgin olive oil if you can avoid it, but serve it more raw or cook it on low temperatures. And then ghee, which is an extraordinary food. And again, we have a lot of studies, just countless studies on fat now, especially since this health crisis where basically for the last 30, 35 years, to provide a nice texture and a certain kind of taste in low-fat food, manufacturers replaced fats, which we were told were unhealthy, with hydrogenated vegetable oils, which the body simply cannot process. That means hydrogenated means it's solidified. It's highly processed and solidified. And again, the body cannot do anything with this. And so it clogs the channels, the purification channels of the body, the basic functions of the body. And of course, sugar was added. And so we've lost the fat and had way too much sugar and the wrong kind of oil that's made us very, very unhealthy. And so we want these monounsaturated fats that can reduce the bad cholesterol and increase the good cholesterol, because we need cholesterol. It actually feeds the brain, it feeds the nervous system. It's not something like an external force that's bad for us. It's absolutely necessary to good functioning. And healthy fats, again, the monounsaturated fats include nuts, again, seeds, avocados, as well as plant-based cooking oils, olive and avocado, and even coconut oil as well, although that's also considered to be a saturated fat. It also has monounsaturated fats as well, but I should have included coconut oil there. And if you eat just a half or 1.5 avocados each day, that can reduce your LDL cholesterol. Um, I I think they're just an incredible versatile food, and you can even replace, for example, if you're trying to eat more plant-based foods, but you're still wanting something along the lines of I don't know, like chocolate mousse or something like that, you can actually make a chocolate mousse with avocados, and it's delicious. And so you're not having to use, say, dairy products all the time if you're trying to cut back on that. And omega-3 fatty acids are essential polyunsaturated fats that decrease inflammation, really important for, again, for the immune system. They lower heart disease risk and promote healthy brain function. And fish, including salmon and halibut and tuna, plus avocados and ghee, are very rich in omega-3 fatty acids. So ghee, you'll find, is extremely important in the Ayurvedic pantheon, because it uses that medicinally as well as nutritionally, and ghee is just a bit of a superfood. Of course, you have to balance out the heavy metal toxicity of fish with regards to the fats that you want to consume. So I certainly don't recommend consuming a lot of fish, maybe once or twice a week at the most. And if you want fatty fish that don't have a lot of heavy metals, then choose small fish rather than the big ones like tuna. And so Ayurvedic advice on fats is do it, eat lots of fat. Ayurveda is all about adding ghee to everything, cooking with ghee, adding it after the fact, oiling the body, whether it be with ghee or sesame oil or coconut oil. Fat is very essential for the body. Ayurveda also considers it important to put oils even in the nostrils, for example, on a regular basis. Just put a little bit of ghee or a little bit of sesame oil on your little finger, and you put it in the nostril. And this helps to avoid that drying out effect that we saw earlier about the dehydration, which leaves you open to pathogens. So ghee is quite extraordinary for the gut. It contains a high level of butyric acid, which is already produced by the microbiome. It is produced especially based on fiber. So if you have a high fiber diet, you're going to have very happy microbes in your gut, high fiber and ghee, and they will be super happy. And ghee is the only compound, along with alcohol, which can cross the blood-brain barrier. And so it really directly nourishes the brain. It doesn't even need to go through the liver and all the other processes. It can actually be transported through the body and through the tissues in a completely different way to other fats. And it leads then to a more calm feeling, a calm disposition, more balanced emotions, and mental clarity. And oils should be eaten every day with every meal. And every day, ideally, massage them into your skin. So sesame oil is my particular favorite. It's a good one for most people, and especially for the climate that we're in Northern Europe. And there are bacteria on the outer part of our skin, on the epidermis, and they have a particular affinity for sesame oil. They particularly like that, more so than other oils. Almond oil is also very good. Olive oil is also very good on the skin, but the sesame is a big favorite. Moving is very important. Just move your body. Exercise in the way that suits you best. we just feel better and we live better when we move, when we get some kind of action going through the day. So when you are active, you'll stay well, you'll stay engaged in life, and the body will be happy. This is, again, the only way that we can move lymph is by moving the body. And again, there's just incredible research to back this up. Regular exercise is vital to cardiovascular health. It lowers stress and depression markers. It supports your circulation of lymphs. That means that it's helping you to detoxify. And in the short term, it helps the immune system find and deal with pathogens because of that process of circulating lymph. The lymph is part of that emunctory function, which helps to process things that we don't want in the body. And so when you're moving your body and you're stimulating the metabolism, the immune system has less work to do to actually move things out of the body. And regular exercise over the long term slows down those oxidative factors, that aging related changes that impact the immune system. And therefore, you're also less susceptible to infections. So, moving is extremely important to a healthy lifestyle. It doesn't have to be any specific kind of exercise. And Ayurveda says exactly the same. As part of a dinacharya, as part of the daily program, you exercise regularly and ideally early in the morning, ideally on an empty stomach, doing some mild exercise, and then going for a little walk after every meal as another way of exercising, but also to improve digestion. So early morning and late afternoon are the most beneficial times to exercise. Of course, you can exercise any other time of the day. The one suggestion is that Ayurveda would say never exercise in extreme heat, and because that's really depleting. It's not helpful, and it can actually cause more harm than good. And too much of anything is not good. So too much exercise or overexertion is depleting, especially for some types of people. The sort of vata types will really be depleted over time. And so yoga poses, stretching, walking, and so on should be done daily. That kind of exercise should be a kind of a basic, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or something like that every single day. And then you can do other things on top of that. And finally, gratitude. This is a bit of a bonus. We've now had 10 different things, but this is number 11. And gratitude is actually something that allows us to just feel so much better. In so many ways, and it has been shown that we live longer, we live more connected, we live happier when we practice gratitude. And again, it's been studied to the moon and back, and gratitude increases very important neurochemicals, neuropeptides, they're called, the hormones of feeling good feelings. And so when we shift our attitude from negative things to positive things, and we start to cultivate this sense of well-being and gratitude, there's this flood of dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin in the body that makes you feel just super, makes you feel really connected to other people, to life itself. You can be more clear, more creative, and your inflammation lowers, and your stress lowers, and it improves immunity, and you feel you can live longer and better. You just feel good. And Ayurveda says the same thing. Ayurveda says that we should regularly pray or meditate or chant. And that action, that devotional act, is humbling. It helps us to stay connected to something bigger than ourselves. And then, of course, it has that neurological effect. And this is part of the Ayurvedic lifestyles, to recognize that we need to have time and space for our spiritual side. And whenever Ayurveda proposes medicine, the attitude should be one of gratitude, where you are grateful for the medicine, even if it tastes awful, and even if you don't really want it. But there is this effect of positivity on taking the medicine with this attitude, having faith in its healing qualities, having faith in the good intentions behind the medicine. And when you take it, the body takes it in a very different way. We know that there's something called the nocebo effect that has also been widely studied. That nocebo effect is the opposite of the placebo effect, which means that there's a sense that If you don't believe in something or you believe it's going to be harmful, it will be, and it causes harm to the body, and that will actually prevent you from getting the benefit, for example, of the medicine that you're taking. If we use the current example of vaccines, where people are taking vaccines but they're nervous about them or fearful, or resentful, or whatever the emotion is, it's better to try and clear out that emotion, make your peace with the choice to take the vaccine, and take it with a feeling that there's so much devotion and love going towards this vaccine, all the scientists, all of the people who have researched it to try and make this vaccine with the intention of making people healthy, whether you are in agreement with that process or not. If you are taking the vaccine, you should take it with that spirit, because the body will take it in a much more harmonious way. And the same with how you live your life with regards to others, offering alms, donating money like you've done to see this presentation, being helpful, being cheerful. This is part of Ayurveda's kind of prescription for living well. And there would be really an advocation of just saying, please, be cheerful. Even when things are going bad, try and remain positive, remain cheerful, remain optimistic. And these are all considered really healthy daily practices, and all now supported by science as well. And I wanted to share with you something really interesting, which sums up what we've just seen now. And this is by NASA. So, NASA, of course, does mega research on everything, and there's nothing extraneous. So, when they're sending people out in space, everything has to have a purpose, everything has to be worth something. And so, what NASA does for its astronauts is it has them practice connect. And connect stands for community. So, seeking ways to support society and contribute to the greater good as a way of feeling better. And openness, being open minded, looking for ways to adapt to life's challenges. Networking, making contacts, interacting with other people, and having new things to do and information to share. And needs, connecting with your needs, keeping a routine. There's that magic word, routine. Eat and sleep well, maintain physical and emotional health, exercise, and having an expeditionary mindset, confronting challenges head on, saying, I can do this, I got this, having that positive outlook, and seeking support from people that you know that will be the right people to help you, and then provide support for others. Be a team. And countermeasures, so take care of yourself, making sure that when things are going wrong, you know what to do. So reduce your stress, take action there, be mindful of your strengths, be mindful of what's going right in your life, and also journaling and sharing your concerns, sharing whatever is going on with you. Don't hold it in. And then finally, training. Build on what you've learned in life. Keep advancing through life. Enhance your skills and learn new ones. Keep a growth mindset. And this is connect. So I think if NASA has summarized that for us, then we can say that those things are certainly worthwhile practices, because you can be sure that there's good data behind that, or they wouldn't be wasting their time with it. And then to just leave you with a kind of a summary of the main things to remember. If you don't remember anything else, just remember that having a daily routine is extremely important. And if you just do those basic things, go to bed early, eat regular meals, enjoy an early morning practice. If you just do this most of the time, you're going to have a great life. Your health will be good, and you will be happy and healthy for a very long time. And then the second one is digestion, making sure you're on top of your digestion. Digestion is really everything. Digestive problems from the point of view of Ayurveda, and now the science is catching up, are not symptoms. They are not they're not something that is a result of something. They are actually triggers for disease. So when digestion has gone off, you're in the early stages of disease, and you can still do something about it. So fix your digestion, make sure that it's regular, that it's healthy, that you're working on fixing it if it's not, and you will avoid further damage going down the line. And then the third thing is moderation. do everything in moderation. The middle way is healthy and sustainable for everything in all areas of life. And that applies to how we relate to the world around us in terms of our consumption, in terms of our interaction with the world and how we participate in the world. And so by keeping those things in mind, you will be really quite well. There's not a lot to do that you need to do on a daily basis that keeps you well. Just do it consistently. And I'd like to leave you with this message that your health is in your hands. And it's not about a supplement or medicine. There's nothing outside of you that is going to improve your immunity. Absolutely nothing that you can consume is going to be of benefit for you unless your diet and your routine is also good for you. And it's going to keep you strong. It'll keep you resilient, and your immune system will be good for a very long time if you take care of all of those things. So don't waste your money on expensive supplements and medicines that your body can't even process because it may not even be digesting properly. We call that really expensive urine. And so you just do life well, be well, and be well most of the time, and you will be really healthy and thrive. So thank you very much for listening through that. It was a bit longer than I had planned. I thought it would be only about an hour and a half. I guess it's a little bit longer than that. So you're still here, still awake. If you've got any questions, do go ahead and ask, and we can see how any of that.
Yeah, Susan, I have a couple. When you were talking about diet, most of which made a lot of sense and a lot of which I follow anyway, I don't remember you mentioning eggs. What does Ayurveda say about eggs?
So they're perfectly fine. It's just about when and who and quantity and so on. So again, it's in the category of dairy and meat and so on. Eggs are heavy to digest. And so it's, sometimes people have a really hearty breakfast of like sausages and eggs and potatoes and this kind of thing. And it's not really easy for the body to digest that. That would be great for brunch, for example, a late breakfast, early lunch. Yeah. But to actually, digest that at sort of 8 in the morning, that's really hard work for the body. It doesn't mean not to eat eggs. It's just, can you digest them? How do you feel afterwards? What's the best time of day for you to take them? And also, what's the best form for you to take them in? If you take a hard-boiled egg, for example, more difficult to digest than, say, a fried egg sunny side up. So how are you eating it? And that's the only question. From an Ayurvedic point of view, nothing is off the table. It's just how will you process it? And sometimes we do in the West, people will make an egg salad preparation, and that's got mayonnaise as well as the egg. And that's actually not such a bad thing because it's adding oil. So it makes it easier, because if you notice, eggs are also quite drying. So again, it's a question of what you're adding to it. Pepper, salt, oil, all those things will make it easier for you to digest.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good, because my favorite lunch is actually omelette and salad. So
yeah.
So that sounds like it fits okay.
And then see how you can work in some spices. So how can you add a bit of, I don't know, rosemary or oregano or turmeric or whatever into the preparation that you're making?
Yeah, I do put fresh herbs in it, actually, but I hadn't thought about trying spices. I might try that. Yeah. My second question was something you haven't mentioned, and perhaps it's too specific to me, but I find that since the menopause, my metabolism has really changed. My body's changed. My life hygiene, my eating, my habits haven't changed that much, but I've gained a lot of weight, and my sleep's changed and all that. So I wondered if there were anything that you could say about that briefly.
Yeah, and this is part of the different life stages. And so when you go through childhood to early youth, you have a really fast metabolism. You've got a lot of energy expenditure, and the metabolism really keeps up with that. And so you can eat a lot of food. And then you go through midlife until, in the women's case, until we get to menopause. And the metabolism is stable, kind of stable through midlife. And then at the menopause, metabolism really does slow down, because now we're in a stage where we're more in a catabolic energy, where we're no longer producing so much as deteriorating. And that sounds terrible, but it's, on a cellular level, it's more rapid deterioration than anabolism. This anabolic energy is no longer really there, and that's why we have to be even more careful with what we eat. And I went through menopause about 5 years ago, and I found that I wasn't so hungry anymore. But what was happening in the first couple of years was that I was eating the same amount, because I hadn't really adjusted for I was eating, especially my kids were still at home, and so I was just eating what we would normally eat. And then I was like, wow, I'm gonna like love handles, and this is not working for me at all. And so I realized that actually I wasn't hungry a lot of the times. I was eating more habitually than consciously.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be that you're in that phase where you don't need so much food. And I'm actually really happy with about 2 meals a day, most times. And so what I'll do is have a very small meal. Often my dinner is really small, really a very small thing. But I'll have my breakfast and my lunch. And if lunch has been a sufficient lunch, I'm often not hungry at all for dinner. And then I'll just have an infusion, or I'll have maybe a miso soup or something like that.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that has become my preference as well. But I mean, with the lockdown, I'm also moving less as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's also to do with that as well, because I'm not particularly eating.
So that's when you get up and jump around and shake.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a mini trampoline. I'm going to try that.
Yeah, that's excellent, and that's the best way to move lymph, actually.
Yeah, I read that. That's one of the reasons why I got it. It's a bit squeaky. I'm a bit worried about my neighbours downstairs.
Yeah, they probably just think you're having great sex, so that's great. That's fun.
Well, yeah, that's fine. if it was true, that would be fine.
So yeah, if you just do like 10 minutes a day of that, then you might also find that your metabolism changes as well.
Right.
And the thing is that it's important to understand that it's normal. But what happens is, like in the West, what happens is you often hear things like, yeah, it's only aging, it's normal, get used to it. But the way that Ayurveda looks at it is something's changing, so adjust. So you're aging, but it doesn't mean things have to deteriorate. It means you need to now move into maintenance mode, where you go from that mode of dispensing, energy and expenditure of energy and lots of eating and moving around and so on. You go into a calmer phase, and even biologically calmer phase, where you just don't need as much. And so what you need is more dense nutrition, and maybe a more regular schedule as well, that helps the metabolism fire up. Try also with the trick with water before meals. This is amazing. If you drink 15 to 30 minutes before a meal, and you take a good sized glass of water, my preference is warm water. It also helps the body. Then you could take, for example, a cup of green tea, if that's something you like. That would be a good time to do it. And you'll find that also that speeds up your metabolism. By the time you start eating, you're ready now for the food. Your body's all prepared and it's ready to take on this food. And so you're digesting better. You'll be assimilating better. So,
thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, I see a little message here. Good. All right. Yeah, it's getting late. Anybody else? We've already lost one.
Yeah, if I can ask a question, Susan, about the fish.
Yeah.
Because you just mentioned also the heavy metal content in fish, and you gave some examples of fish that are rich in omega-3. So of those, what would be the best to have if you wanted to?
One thing I didn't mention is sardines. And actually I should, I know. But sardines are actually another really good oily fish, really rich in omega-3s, and they don't have such a long life. They're small and they don't live very long before they're caught. And what that means is they don't have time to bioaccumulate the heavy metals. And so that's a kind of a safer bet if you're going to eat the fish. But what I would say is, go for whatever the best quality fish is that you can find. It's going to be difficult in this modern world to find fish that's not affected because all waterways are polluted and plastic pollution is everywhere. Plastic pollution has reached the most remote corners of the earth, and so fish are consuming plastic. And so it's not just heavy metals, but it's plastics as well. And so my rationale is I would rather find omega-3s elsewhere, and I find it mostly through ghee. And so I can be sure of the source of the butter. I get really good quality raw butter, and I make my ghee myself. And there's lots of omega-3s. There's omega-6 as well in the right proportion.
I
Because
didn't realize that. Oh, okay.
yeah, ghee is an amazing food. I didn't spend a lot of time on it this evening, but I could go on and on about the nutritional qualities of ghee. It's amazing. And the other thing there with the fish is that there's a lot of farmed fish now. Tuna is always wild caught because of the nature of the fish. It's just a big fish that needs the ocean to swim in. But there's a lot of farmed fish now, like trout and salmon and so on. And they've studied salmon. Farmed salmon has now got an outrageously imbalanced proportion of omega-6 to omega-3. So normally the omega-3 should be in higher proportion to omega-6, and it balances out the inflammatory effect of omega-6 because omega-6 fatty acids actually cause inflammation, and omega-3 will be anti-inflammatory. And so there's more omega-3 in a healthy salmon than omega-6.
Yeah, I avoid farmed salmon because it also has dye in it. You know, there's a color chart. The fish farmers choose the color of the flesh from a chart, and they add dye to the water. And also they also add lots of antibiotics because they put so many fish in the water, they get diseases. And so I actually don't eat farmed salmon at all anymore. I only get, and it's difficult to get in Belgium, but I prefer wild salmon from Canada or Alaska when I can get it. And I actually tend to eat more mackerel, which is something that's still, I think it's just about the only fish that's still fished in large quantities in England, actually. So, and it's an oily fish as well.
Right.
But I love salmon, and I just hardly ever have it now because I won't eat farmed salmon. I read something about it and saw a documentary, and it completely put me off when I saw this color chart and the antibiotics and.
No, I don't. When I hear things like that, this is why I'm very happy to be a vegetarian. And I do avoid fish largely for that reason, because fish can be a very healthy food option, but it then should be like, you have to be a food snob around fish. You just have to go for the absolute best you can find, and spend the money that's necessary to get the best, and enjoy it rarely, and then you'll have a really great meal.
Yeah.
I mean, I hardly eat it, but I have actually started only in my 30s because I couldn't stand it before. I would actually cross the street if I was going to go past the fishmongers because the smell even. But since then I've been eating, I mean, never in huge quantities, but it's just good to know what's the best choice I can make, because if you eat it for health, but then the disadvantages are greater than the advantages.
It's almost like it's kind of 50-50 with salmon. I agree with what Cheryl has said. I've seen too much, and I'm very sad because it also is affecting wild salmon because they are escaping the fisheries, and they are also obviously in some cases in the same water as the wild salmon, and so that where do they think the fish water is going? So it is kind of a sad situation that we're in. Yeah, keep it for special occasions and go really high end.
Yeah.
So Susan, I wanted to thank you for a really great presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I have a rule so I can go to bed at 10.
Good for
That
you.
at 9 o'clock I close all my screens.
I do the
find
same.
technology is
Fantastic,
overstimulating.
You're absolutely right to do that. I have the same
sorry,
rule.
So I'm sorry, but I'm going to go now.
Don't be sorry. I'm delighted to hear that.
I've had to introduce some strict rules for myself.
Yeah,
and that's one
no,
of
but
them.
this is a good one. I really, unless I have a really important thing the next morning that I have to intervene on, I am all switched off at 9 o'clock. It's my kind of outer limit as well.
Yeah.
Good for you. Okay.
So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cheryl. Good to see you again. Enjoy, everybody. Irma's already in bed. Good for you, Irma. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Susan, can I ask you just one
sure.
question? I don't know if more people have signed up, or if they sign up later, could they get the recording?
The video they can just make a donation and send me a message. So anybody who makes a donation up until the 30th of June, I can send them the recording.
Because I shared the information with a few friends, and I'm hoping some of them might.
That's lovely. Yeah, they're welcome to it. Yeah, super.
Okay, great.
Thanks for doing that.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.